The dim hum of the station's life support filled the observation deck like a distant heartbeat. Captain Ilara Voss leaned against the viewport, her fingers tracing the cold alloy frame as stars streaked by in hyperspace. At 42 she was all lean muscle and sharp angles, her dark hair cropped short for the long hauls. She'd captained the Endeavour for 8 years, ferrying diplomats and data across the fractured alliances of the galaxy. Humans were rare out here, tolerated more than welcomed, but Ilara had a knack for turning suspicion into uneasy respect. Beside her, Jax Harlan tinkered with a holographic display, his broad shoulders hunched over the flickering panel. The engineer was her oldest crewmate, a wiry man in his 30s with grease-stained hands and a perpetual squint from staring into engine cores. Fuel efficiency's holding at 87%, he muttered, not looking up. But these alien mods are finicky. One glitch and we're drifting. Ilara nodded, her eyes fixed on the void. The Endeavour was a retrofit relic, human-built but patched with tech from a dozen species. Krell conduits, Vexery shields, even a salvaged Thaler NAV core. It was why they got the jobs no one else wanted. Smuggling aid through contested zones, negotiating with the reclusive Enclave worlds. Their current run was routine, or so the brief said, deliver a cultural artifact to the neutral station at Nexus Prime. But Ilara trusted routines about as much as she trusted the stars to stay put. A soft chime echoed from the comms panel. "Captain," came the voice of Mira Chen, their xenolinguist, smooth and precise as always. She was the youngest at 28, with a cascade of black hair tied back and eyes that missed nothing. Mira had joined 2 years ago, fresh from Earth's linguistics academies, her cautious nature a counterweight to Jax's impulsiveness. Incoming transmission from Nexus Prime. They're requesting docking clearance early. Something about atmospheric anomalies. Ilara straightened. Anomalies? Patch it through. The hollow flickered to life, projecting a stern-faced alien with iridescent scales. The station's coordinator, a Lyraxi named Vorin. His mandibles clicked in agitation. Human vessel Endeavour, your approach is ill-timed. Solar flares disrupt our grid. Delay advised. Jax snorted, killing the hollow. Ill-timed? We've got a schedule. And that artifact ain't gonna deliver itself. He wiped his hands on his jumpsuit, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. Mira appeared at the doorway, datapad in hand. It's not just flares, Captain. Sensors show electromagnetic interference spiking. Could scramble our systems if we push in blind. Her voice held that measured tone, weighing risks like she weighed words. Ilara rubbed her chin, glancing back at the stars. The artifact was a human relic, a carved obsidian disc etched with ancient Earth glyphs, supposedly a peace offering to mend ties with the Enclave. Lose it and their contracts dried up. But forcing a dock. Jax, run diagnostics on the shields. Mira, prep the translation matrix for any weird signals. We adjust course for a wide approach. No heroics. The ship shuddered lightly as Jax initiated the burn, engines thrumming deeper. Ilara felt the familiar pull, the grit of command settling in her gut. Out here the universe didn't care about human schedules. It tested you piece by piece. As they dropped out of hyperspace, Nexus Prime loomed, a spindly wheel of metal and light orbiting a gas giant scarred by storms. The station's docking arms extended like hesitant fingers, but the readouts painted a grim picture. Interference levels climbing, power fluctuations rippling across the hull. Jax cursed under his breath. Shields at max, but if those flares hit peak. A proximity alert blared. Not a flare. Something else, a shadow detaching from the station's silhouette, sleek and predatory. Pirate raiders, Enclave defectors, or worse. Ilara's hand slammed the alarm. Battle stations. Mira, hail them. Jax, get us evasive. The shadow accelerated, weapons ports glowing. The Endeavour banked hard, but the first shot grazed their flank, sparking against the Vexery shields. Alarms wailed. In the chaos, Ilara gripped the console, her mind racing. This wasn't a routine run anymore. It was survival. The dim glow of the habitat pod's emergency lights cast long shadows across the control console, where Ilara hunched over the flickering holographic display. Her fingers danced across the interface, pulling up schematics of the derelict station they'd stumbled upon. The air recyclers hummed faintly, a reminder that their suit seals were holding, for now. Outside, the void of the nebula's edge pressed in, a swirling chaos of gas and debris that the Alliance's perfect order had never tamed. "See this?" Elara said, her voice steady but edged with that human grit Jax had come to rely on. She pointed to a jagged line on the hollow map, a fracture running through the station's core. Jax, the cautious Vortian engineer, leaned in closer, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the light in a dozen prisms. He adjusted his translator implant, ensuring the words aligned with his native harmonics. "A structural weakness," Jax replied, his tone measured like a melody resolving too soon. "But why dock here at all? The beacon pulled us in, yes, but the scan showed instability. We could reroute to the nearest relay." Elara shot him a wry smile, the kind that said she thrived on the edge. "Because stable is boring, Jax. And because that beacon's broadcasting in old human code, pre-alliance contact. If it's what I think, it could rewrite everything we know about the decline." She tapped the console, zooming in on a sealed vault deep within the station's bowels. Her brave streak shone through, not in grand declarations, but in the way she ignored the warning klaxons blaring about hull integrity. Jax hesitated, his tendrils twitching, a Vortian tell for unease. The Alliance had drilled order into him: predict, prepare, preserve. Humans like Elara disrupted that, their camaraderie a wild rhythm against his structured score. Yet here he was, paired with her on this fringe mission, chasing echoes of humanity's fall. "The risk is not abstract," he said. "Debris field density is rising. One micrometeor could..." A sharp jolt rocked the pod, cutting him off. Alarms wailed as the docking clamps groaned under impact. Elara braced against the console, her eyes narrowing. "Not a meteor. Something hit us deliberate." She pulled up external cams, revealing a sleek shadow detaching from the station's hull. A rival scavenger drone, its hull etched with unauthorized Alliance mods. Not official, but close enough to mean trouble. Jax's caution surged into action. He sealed the inner bulkhead with a swift command. "They're probing our defenses. If they breach, we lose the pod." The drone circled back, its scanning beams slicing through the nebular haze like accusatory fingers. Elara's mind raced ahead, her ingenuity kicking in. She overrode the pod's meager defenses, rerouting power to a makeshift EMP burst. Not Alliance-approved tech, but human cobbled from scavenged parts. "Cover me," she said, suiting up with practiced efficiency. Jax nodded, his wit emerging in a dry quip. "As if I have a choice in your chaos." He manned the auxiliary controls, feeding her a path through the debris while she vented into the station's airlock. The drone fired a warning shot, grazing the pod's flank and sparking a small fire in the outer plating. Heat bloomed, tangible and immediate, the acrid scent seeping through filters. Elara cycled the lock, emerging into the station's corridor with her multi-tool in hand. The air was stale, laced with the metallic tang of long-abandoned systems. She moved low, boots magnetized to the deck, eyes on the vault's access point. Behind her the comm crackled, Jax's voice urgent. "Drone's adapting, it's jamming our signal. You have 2 minutes before it locks on." She reached the fracture line, the schematics overlaying her visor. A quick plasma cut, and the panel hissed open, revealing conduits pulsing with faint energy. But as she pried deeper, a secondary alarm tripped. Station defenses awakening, automated turrets whirring to life. Bullets pinged off the walls, forcing her to dive behind a bulkhead. The cost hit home. One graze on her suit and decompression would claim her in seconds. Back in the pod, Jax watched the feeds, his resolve hardening. He couldn't let her grit fizzle out here. With a deep breath, he initiated a risky protocol, diverting the pod's thrusters to nudge the docking arm, buying her a window. The maneuver shook the structure, disorienting the turrets just long enough. Elara seized it, jamming a bypass into the vault's lock. The door ground open, spilling data crystals into the low-G drift. But the drone capitalized, latching onto the pod's hull with grapples. Jax felt the pull, the stakes sharpening. Elara, extraction now. They're boarding. She scooped the crystals, her laughter breathless over the comm, a human spark in the void. "Got him. And Jax? Thanks for the dance." As she retreated, the station groaned, the fracture widening from the strain. Pieces of hull sloughed off into the nebula, a lingering scar on the ordered frontier. They weren't out yet, but in that moment the camaraderie bound them tighter than any alliance decree. Captain Alara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the ship's engines a low growl beneath the alert klaxons. The view screen flickered with static, the nebulous tendrils coiling like smoke from a dying fire. "Status, Reyes?" she called, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead. Engineer Marco Reyes wiped grease from his hands on his jumpsuit, his dark eyes narrowing at the console. "Shields are holding at 30%, but the plasma surges are frying the relays. If we don't reroute power soon, we'll be sitting ducks." He was the cautious one, always double-checking schematics, but now his fingers flew across the panels with grim determination. Beside him, the alien navigator, Crix, tilted his elongated head, his bioluminescent skin pulsing faint blues in agitation. "The gravitational anomalies are shifting. We cannot plot a stable course through this haze. Your human shortcut idea from earlier, it accelerates the decay." Crix's voice clicked with frustration, his forearms gesturing at the holographic map where red warnings bloomed like bloodstains. Alara nodded, masking her doubt. The plan had seemed solid back in the ready room. Skim the nebula's edge, use its magnetic fields to slingshot past the pursuing raiders. But the anomalies had thickened faster than scans predicted, turning their bold maneuver into a trap. A jolt rocked the bridge, sparks erupting from an overhead panel. Marco lunged, yanking wires free before the fire suppression foam could flood the space. "Raiders closing," Crix announced, his claws tapping urgently. 3 jagged silhouettes pierced the nebula's glow on the screen, their weapons ports gleaming. The rival clan's ships, scavengers who'd ambushed their convoy for the rare isotopes in the hold, were adapting, their shields modulating to the plasma bursts. Alara unstrapped, rising to pace the short distance to the engineering feed. "Options? We can't outrun them and fighting suicide with our guns offline." Her mind raced, piecing together fragments. The nebulous currents, the ship's overtaxed core, Marco's offhand mention of jury-rigging the auxiliary thrusters. Marco straightened, a spark of his usual wit breaking through. "We could vent the cargo bay, use the isotopes as a chaff burst. Disorient their sensors long enough to flip the ship and burn hard the other way." He sketched it quickly on his tablet, lines sharp and improvised. Crix's lights flickered amber, skeptical. "Risky. The isotopes could ignite the nebula. We lose the cargo, we lose our payout, and perhaps the ship." The deck shuddered again, a direct hit glancing off the hull. Alarms wailed. Alara met their gazes, the weight of command settling like the nebula's fog. "Do it." Reyes prepped the vents. "Crix, plot the escape vector assuming we blind them for 10 seconds. No time for debate, action now, consequences later." Marco bolted for the access ladder, tools clanging against his belt. As he descended, Alara watched the raiders tighten their formation, their lead ship firing a probing shot that lit the void in electric blue. The gamble teetered on the edge, human grit against cosmic chaos. If it failed, the isotopes wouldn't be the only thing lost. The dim glow of the emergency lights cast long shadows across the control deck of the Endeavour, where Captain Alara Voss gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles whitening against the worn leather. The ship hummed uneasily, its corridors whispering with the faint creaks of stressed metal. Beside her, Engineer Tomas Reyes hunched over a flickering console, his fingers dancing across the keys like a pianist in a storm. "It's the core regulator," he muttered, voice steady but laced with the grit of someone who'd patched worse. Across from them, Navigator Lila Chin leaned against the bulkhead, her sharp eyes scanning the readouts, calculating trajectories in her head faster than any algorithm. The challenge had hit them like a meteor strike, a cascade failure in the warp drive, triggered by a rogue ion storm that had shredded their shields. They were adrift in the void between stars, oxygen reserves ticking down to hours, not days. No distress beacon would reach help in time. The nearest colony was a ghost signal, abandoned after some forgotten war. Alara's mind raced. She was the brave one, the one who charged into unknowns, but bravery meant nothing without a plan. Options, she said, her tone cutting through the hum like a laser. Tomas wiped sweat from his brow, his cautious nature shining through as he double-checked his diagnostics. We reroute power from life support to the auxiliary thrusters. Buy us time to jury-rig the regulator. But it'll get cold fast, real cold? Lila nodded, her wit surfacing in a wry smile. Or we drift toward that nebula on the starboard scan. Looks pretty, but it'll fry the hull like bacon in a pan. They weren't heroes from old tales, just three humans who'd signed on for the frontier, bound by the quiet camaraderie of shared risks. Ilara stood, pacing the narrow deck, the ship's subtle vibrations reminding her of the stakes. Losing the Endeavor meant more than their lives. Cargo holds full of seeds and tools for a new outpost, humanity's fragile push against the galaxy's indifference. The first plan formed quick. Tomas would lead the repair, Lila plotting a minimal burn to align with a nearby asteroid for cover. Ilara suited up to manually vent the plasma buildup, her suit seals hissing like a warning. Down in the engineering bay, the air grew thick with the acrid tang of overheating circuits. Tomas pried open a panel, sparks dancing like fireflies, while Lila's voice crackled over the comms from the bridge. Burn in 3, 2. The ship lurched as thrusters fired, a jolt that sent tools skittering. Ilara floated in the access tube, her gloved hands wrestling the valve, muscles burning against the resistance. It stuck, corroded from the storm's fury. She gritted her teeth, leveraging her weight, the stars wheeling outside the porthole in silent judgment. The valve gave with a groan, venting the plasma in a brilliant azure plume that lit the void like a comet's tail. But the backfire came swift. A feedback surge rippled through the systems, alarms blaring as secondary conduits ruptured. Tomas cursed, sealing a breach with a hasty weld, his hands steady despite the heat singeing his sleeves. "Captain, we've got a hull microfracture. Pressure dropping." Lila's voice cut in, urgent but calm. "Adapting course, using the asteroid's gravity to slingshot us clear. Hold on." Tension coiled like a spring in Ilara's chest as she hauled back to the deck, the cold already seeping through her uniform. They adapted on the fly. Tomas bypassed the failed regulator with a makeshift coil from salvaged med-scanner parts, his ingenuity turning scrap into salvation. Lila's calculations shaved precious minutes, threading the needle between debris fields. Ilara coordinated, her decisions sharp, pulling them together when doubt flickered. Hours blurred into a haze of sweat and sparks. The warp drive sputtered to life, a reluctant growl that steadied into a purr. They weren't out of the nebula's reach yet. The ion wake lingered, promising more storms, but the Endeavor inched forward, oxygen holding, the outpost's promise intact. Ilara slumped into her chair, exchanging nods with Tomas and Lila. No speeches, just the quiet weight of survival, the galaxy a touch less hostile for their grit. But the fracture in the hull would need weeks to mend, a scar reminding them of the cost. Elena gripped the railing as the corridor shuddered again, the alien ship's groans echoing like distant thunder. Sweat beaded on her forehead, not just from the rising heat but from the gnawing certainty that their makeshift plan was unraveling faster than the hull plating. Marco crouched beside the access panel, his tools clinking softly against the iridescent metal, his usual smirk replaced by a tight line of concentration. "Got it?" he muttered, voice low and edged with that familiar wit that kept them sane. "These circuits are like a drunkard's wiring, twisted, but I can reroute the power flow to the core without frying us all." His fingers danced over the exposed wires, sparks flickering like fireflies in the dim emergency lighting. Lila hovered behind them, her tablet clutched like a shield, eyes scanning the readouts. "The environmental seals are holding at 30%. If we don't stabilize the gravity field soon, the whole deck collapses. And those readings from the lower levels, something's moving down there. Not structural. Alive." Elena's jaw clenched. The ship, this colossal relic from a long-extinct species, had seemed a godsend when their shuttle crashed into its hangar bay 3 days ago. Salvage protocols, endless resources, a way home. But the automated defenses had activated upon their entry, turning bulkheads into traps and corridors into mazes. Their team, her, Marco, Lila, and the silent but steadfast drone they jury-rigged from shuttle parts, was down to basics. Dwindling oxygen recyclers, a single pulse rifle, and human stubbornness. She nodded to Marco. Do it. We need that auxiliary power to seal the breach in the aft section. Can't have vacuums sucking us out while we debate. He twisted the final connector, and a low hum built through the deck, vibrating up their boots. For a heartbeat, relief washed over Elena. The lights brightened, the shutter eased. Then, a sharp crack split the air like bone snapping. Alarms blared, red strobes painting their faces in bloody hues. The panel erupted in a shower of sparks, hurling Marco back against the wall with a grunt. Damn it. He scrambled up, clutching his singed arm, the smell of burnt insulation thick in the recycled air. Feedback loop. The system's fighting us, it's adaptive, learning our moves. Lila's tablet chimed urgently. Power surge redirected. It's venting atmosphere from the forward bays. We're losing pressure fast. Elena pulled Marco to his feet, her mind racing through options that felt thinner than the thinning air. The plan had been simple. Tap into the ship's dormant engines, use the thrust to maneuver toward the nearest beacon. But this vessel wasn't dead, it was wounded, lashing out at intruders with a ferocity that mirrored their own desperation. And now, whatever lurked below, those motion signatures, seemed to sense the disturbance closing in. Regroup, she said, voice steady despite the panic clawing at her chest. Lila, map an alternate route to the engine room. Marco patched that arm and grabbed the toolkit. We adapt or we die here. As they moved, the ship twisted underfoot, a metallic wail rising from the depths. Elena glanced back, catching a glimpse of shadows slithering along the far wall, elongated, purposeful. Not machinery. Something that had waited in the dark for eons, awakened by their meddling. Her hand tightened on the pulse rifle's grip. Humanity's gift wasn't just tools, it was the refusal to yield, even when the stars themselves conspired against them. They ducked into a side vent, the drone whirring ahead to scout, its single optic pulsing blue. The air grew stale, each breath a reminder of the stakes. Marco winced as he bound his wound with a strip from his jumpsuit. You know, Cap, if we pull this off, I'm writing the report. How 3 idiots outsmarted a ghost ship. Bestseller material. Lila shot him a glare, but her lips twitched. Focus. The schematics show a junction ahead. Might be our shot at isolating the AI subroutine. Elena led them forward, the vent's confines pressing close, every scrape and echo amplified. The shadow's pursuit felt inevitable, a hunter in its domain. But humans didn't run from hunts. They turned them, improvised traps from scraps, forged paths where none existed. As the vent opened into a cavernous chamber lined with glowing conduits, she felt that spark ignite, the ingenuity that had carried their species from caves to cosmos. Yet the chamber wasn't empty. Coils of what looked like biomechanical tendrils writhed from the walls, pulsing with the ship's heartbeat. The drone halted, emitting a warning beep. Lila's voice dropped to a whisper. That's the security nexus. If we cut it wrong, the whole system crashes, and takes us with it. Marco eyed the tendrils, his wit surfacing like a lifeline. Or we make friends. Ever think this ship's just lonely? Been drifting alone longer than we've been walking upright. Elena raised the rifle, sighting the central node where the tendrils converged. No time for jokes. Cover me. We sever it clean, then bolt for the engines. She fired a low-yield pulse, the beam slicing through the nearest coil. Sap-like fluid sprayed, and the chamber erupted in chaos, tendrils lashing out, the floor bucking like a living thing. They dove behind a console as debris rained down, the air filling with acrid smoke. Lila's hands flew over her tablet, hacking a temporary firewall. I've got a loop running, buying us 30 seconds. Marco lobbed a makeshift EMP grenade from scavenged parts, the blast rippling through the nexus. Tendrils stilled, twitching, then slumped. Elena pushed forward. The dim glow of the emergency lights flickered across the control room, casting long shadows that danced like specters on the bulkheads. Captain Alara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white against the cold metal. She'd always been the steady one, the anchor in the storm, but even she felt the pull of exhaustion now, after days of this endless grind. The ship's AI hummed faintly in the background, its voice a calm monotone that bordered on eerie. Structural integrity at 47%. Recommend immediate evacuation protocols. Beside her, Jax Harlan leaned back in his chair, wiping sweat from his brow with the sleeve of his jumpsuit. He was the optimist, the one who cracked jokes even when the oxygen recyclers sputtered. Evacuation? To where exactly? The void? Nah, we've got this. Remember that time on Rigel 9 when the drill jammed and we MacGyvered it with conduit tape and a prayer? This is just a bigger drill. Elara shot him a look, half grateful, half exasperated. The third member of their trio, Dr. Lena Kaur, paced behind them, her tablet clutched like a shield. She was the thinker, precise and methodical, her dark eyes scanning readouts that meant little to the others. This isn't a jam drill, Jax. The quantum core is destabilizing. If we don't isolate the anomaly, the whole ship unravels, literally. The fabric of space-time around us is fraying. The anomaly. That's what they called it, ever since the survey mission to the outer rim had gone sideways. What started as a routine probe of an uncharted nebula had turned into a nightmare when their sensors picked up the signal. A low-frequency pulse that warped reality itself. Not a black hole, not a wormhole, but something older, hungrier. It had latched onto the Endeavour, their battered exploration vessel, and now it was eating through the hull, section by section. They'd lost comms with Earth 2 days ago, and the nearest colony was weeks away at best. The stakes weren't abstract. They were the air they breathed, the deck beneath their feet. Elara straightened, forcing her voice to steady. All right, plan B it is. Lena, run the simulations again, focus on the containment field mods we tried last shift. Jax, get to engineering and prep the auxiliary generators. We boost power to the shields by ourselves time. Jax nodded, already moving, his boots clanging against the grating. On it, Cap. If this thing wants to play eat the ship, we'll give it indigestion. He flashed a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes, then vanished through the hatch. Lena hesitated, her fingers tapping the tablet. Elara, the simulations, they predict a 23% chance of success. And if it fails, it won't. Elara met her gaze, unyielding. We adapt. That's what we do. As Jax descended into the bowels of the ship, the corridors narrowed, conduits hissing steam that smelled of ozone and regret. The Endeavour was a relic, built for grit over glamour, its walls scarred from a dozen missions. He passed a sealed bulkhead where sparks flew from a breached panel, the anomaly's touch leaving behind veins of iridescent corrosion that pulsed like living things. His tool belt jangled, a comforting weight. Back on Mars Colony, he'd been a mechanic, fixing rovers that broke down in the dust storms. This was bigger, but the principle was the same. Diagnose, improvise, survive. In engineering, the hum of the generators was a roar, drowned out by alarms blaring red. He slid under the main console, prying open an access panel with a crowbar. Wires sparked, and he cursed under his breath, shielding his face. The core room beyond the viewport showed the heart of the problem. A swirling vortex of energy contained by flickering force fields. It tugged at him, a whisper in his mind, promising silence if he just let go. Jack's status? Elara's voice crackled over the intercom. Generators priming. Give me 2 minutes. This baby's got more fight than I thought. Up in the control room, Lena worked feverishly, her simulations painting dire pictures on the holographic display. Lines of code scrolled, probabilities shifting like sand. Elara watched, her mind racing through contingencies. They'd come out here for discovery, for humanity's next leap, not this. But retreat wasn't an option. The anomaly had folded space around them, trapping the ship in a pocket of distorted reality. Escape meant facing it head-on. A jolt rocked the deck, sending Elara stumbling. Alarms wailed louder. Lena. What was that? Containment breach in Sector 4. It's accelerating. Lena's voice cracked, the first sign of her fraying composure. Jax's comms buzzed. Cap, I see it, the fields are buckling. Rerouting power now, but it's like fighting a tidal wave with a bucket. Elara's hands flew over the controls, sealing off the failing section. The ship groaned, metal twisting under invisible strain. She could almost feel the anomaly's curiosity probing their defenses. Humans weren't built for this, but they'd been before they broke. Hold on, Jax. Lena, sync the mods, let's flood it with the EMP burst we prepped. Lena nodded, her fingers blurring. Initiating in 3, 2. The ship shuddered violently as the burst fired, a lance of electromagnetic fury slamming into the core. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, the ALA RMS falling quiet. Then, the viewport and engineering lit up, the vortex shrinking, recoiling. Jax whooped from below. It's working. The thing's pulling back. Relief washed over Captain Alara Voss gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white against the worn metal. She'd always been the steady one, the anchor in storms that would break lesser crews, but now even her resolve felt frayed. Beside her, Jax, the engineer with his perpetual squint and oil-streaked jumpsuit, muttered curses under his breath as he rerouted power for the third time that hour. "We can't keep patching this," Jax said, his voice rough from hours without sleep. He slammed a fist against a panel, and a spark jumped, illuminating the sweat beading on his forehead. "The core's destabilizing faster than we can compensate. If we don't find that relay node soon, the whole ship's gonna tear itself apart." Alara nodded, her eyes fixed on the holographic display. The Endeavor was adrift in the void belt, a graveyard of shattered asteroids and forgotten wrecks, where the universe's entropy seemed to chew through anything mechanical. Their mission had started simple: retrieve a lost data probe from the old human expansion era, back when colonies dotted the stars like fireflies. But the probe's signal had led them here, into this snarl of debris, and now their engines were failing, starved of the exotic particles that kept the warp drive humming. Mira, the navigator, paced behind them, her fingers twisting a data slate like a worry stone. She was the cautious heart of the trio, always double-checking trajectories, but caution hadn't saved them from the micrometeor storm that had shredded their sensors 2 days back. "The readings are off," she said, stopping to lean over Alara's shoulder. "That node's supposed to be in Sector 7 Alpha, but the interference is messing with everything. What if it's not even there? What if this is just another ghost echo from the decline?" The decline. The word hung unspoken between them, a shadow longer than the void itself. Humanity's golden age had crumbled a century ago, colonies isolated, tech failing without the ingenuity to sustain it, the galaxy watching as humans faded into myth. Aliens whispered of it in their councils, debating if the universe's growing chaos stemmed from that void left behind. Alara's team was proof they weren't gone yet, but out here it felt like they were the last flicker. "Ghost or not, we need it," Alara replied, her tone clipped, brooking no argument. She straightened, ignoring the ache in her back from the G-forces of their erratic maneuvers. The probe's data could map stable routes through the belt. Get us home, maybe even rally the outer rims. Jax, boost the scanners again. Mira, plot a manual approach, eyes on, no autopilot. Jax grunted, diving back into the wiring. Sparks flew as he jury-rigged a bypass, the acrid smell of burning insulation filling the air. Mira hesitated, then nodded, her fingers flying over the slate. The ship groaned in response, thrusters firing in short, painful bursts that pushed them deeper into the debris field. Chunks of rock tumbled past the viewport, silent threats in the vacuum. Hours blurred into a tense rhythm. Scan, dodge, repair. Then, a blip, faint but real. "There," Mira whispered, pointing. The holographic map sharpened, revealing a jagged silhouette amid the rocks. The relay node, half buried in a cratered husk that might have been a freighter once. Relief washed over Alara, sharp as a blade, but it soured quickly. Scans showed the node intact, but accessing it meant a spacewalk, through the densest part of the field, where even a pebble could puncture a suit. Jax looked up, wiping grease from his face. "I'll go. You two keep her steady." "No," Alara said firmly, already pulling her helmet from the rack. "I'm lighter on my feet out there. You hold the fort." It wasn't bravado, it was necessity. Jax's bulk made him a liability in zero-G, and Myra's fear of the void was no secret. Alara suited up swiftly, the seals hissing shut like a promise she couldn't quite trust. The airlock cycled and she pushed off into the black. Stars wheeled lazily as she magnetized her boots to the hull, then jetted toward the node. The belt was alive with peril. Fragments glinted in the distant sun, whispering of collisions past. Her tether snaked behind her, taut against the pull. Halfway there, the plan cracked. A rogue asteroid, fist-sized and unforgiving, clipped the Endeavor's flank. Alarms blared in her helmet, Ilara's comms crackling with Jax's shout, "Reach!" Losing pressure in engineering. She froze, the node tantalizingly close, its faint blue glow mocking her. Turn back or push on. The ship shuddered, lights dimming. Myra's voice cut through, "Ilara, we can't hold without you. But if we lose the node..." Grit clenched her jaw. Humanity's decline wasn't just history, it was this moment, this choice. She unspooled more tether, accelerating. The asteroid field closed in, a gauntlet of ice and stone, but she wove through, thrusters flaring in precise bursts, ingenuity born of desperation. Contact. Her gloved hand clamped onto the node's housing, fingers prying at the access panel. Data streamed into her suit's uplink. Coordinates, schematics, a blueprint of paths long lost. But the ship lurched again, Jax's voice strained, "Core's critical. 2 minutes, tops." Ilara yanked the core module free, its weight pulling her off balance. Elena gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the ship's engines vibrating through her bones like a distant earthquake. The view screen flickered with static, painting the bridge in erratic blue flashes that made Marco's face look like a glitch in reality. "Status?" she barked, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Marco wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers dancing over the console. "Anomalies expanding faster than we predicted. It's unraveling the quantum stabilizers. Our shields are at 30% and dropping. If we don't reroute power soon, we'll be spat out into the void like yesterday's ration packs." His wit usually lightened these moments, but now it carried an edge, sharp as the sparks jumping from the panel. Lila paced behind them, her diplomatic robes swishing softly against the deck. She clutched a data pad, eyes scanning the incoming transmissions from the Council fleet. "The others are pulling back. They say it's too unstable, human stubbornness won't change the math. Elena, we have to consider evacuation protocols." Her caution was a steady anchor, but even she couldn't hide the tremor in her words. Elena shook her head, staring at the swirling chaos on the screen. The anomaly wasn't just a hazard, it was devouring the ordered fabric of space itself, turning stable wormholes into unpredictable rifts. Their mission, to deploy the human-engineered coherence field, had seemed straightforward at first, a clever fix born of late-night simulations back on Earth. But now, with the field generator flickering offline, the cost loomed large. If they failed, the entire sector's trade routes would collapse, stranding billions in isolation. No grand speeches about humanity's grit, just the raw fear of watching everything unravel. Evacuate? And leave the generator adrift. Elena stood, her boots thudding against the grating. "Marco, what's the backup plan looking like?" He grimaced, pulling up a holographic schematic that spun lazily in the air. "I jury-rigged a bypass using the auxiliary fusion core, but it's risky. One surge, and we overload the whole system." Boom, literal fireworks in the cosmos. The hologram pulsed red, warning icons blooming like bloodstains. Lila stopped pacing, her hand on Elena's shoulder. "We've adapted before. Remember the asteroid skirmish? But the universe isn't fighting back with lasers. It's erasing the rules we all live by." Elena nodded, but her mind raced. The early plan, to pulse the coherence field in controlled bursts, had backfired spectacularly. The anomaly's feedback loop had amplified their signal, accelerating the decay instead of mending it. Now the ship shuddered as another wave hit, claxons blaring in short, piercing wails. She could feel the deck tilting, gravity compensators straining. "All right," Elena said, decision crystallizing in the heat of the moment. "Marco, initiate the bypass. Lila, get me a direct line to the fleet, tell them we're going manual. No more waiting for consensus." Her voice was steady, but inside doubt gnawed. Was this ingenuity or just desperate flailing? Marco's fingers flew, initiating the reroute. Power surged through the conduits, lights dimming as energy funneled to the generator. The ship groaned, metal protesting like a beast in pain. On the view screen, the anomaly churned closer, tendrils of distorted space reaching out like hungry fingers. Lila activated the comms, her transmission cutting through the interference. "Council vessels, this is the Pioneer. We're committing to the field deployment. Stand by for stabilization pulse. Humanity's not declining today, not on our watch. A ripple coursed through the bridge as the generator whined to life. Elena held her breath, watching the holographic readouts climb. For a heartbeat, it seemed to work. The anomaly's edges sharpened, order creeping back in faint lines of blue. But then, a secondary surge hit, feedback screaming through the systems. Alarms wailed louder, and Marco cursed under his breath. "Overload incoming," he shouted, slamming emergency overrides. The ship bucked violently, throwing Lila against the console. Elena braced, heart pounding, as the view screen shattered into a mosaic of error codes. The plan was fracturing just like the universe around them, and the real cost was only beginning to show. A flickering shield, a drifting fleet, and the unyielding pull of chaos threatening to swallow them whole. Captain Alara Voss gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles white against the cold alloy. The stars outside the viewport blurred into streaks as the Endeavour pushed through the nebula's edge, but her focus was on the holographic display flickering before her. The alien artifact they'd salvaged from the derelict station hummed faintly, its crystalline surface pulsing with erratic light. Beside her, Dr. Kai Ren adjusted his glasses, his cautious fingers tracing the data streams without touching the relic directly. "It's adapting," Kai said, his voice steady but laced with that familiar undercurrent of worry. He was the thinker, always measuring risks before leaping, unlike Alara's instinctive drive forward. "The patterns match the transmissions we intercepted from the core worlds. Whatever this thing is, it's not just a power source, it's a key." Alara nodded, her brave resolve masking the knot in her stomach. The team, her, Kai, and the wiry engineer Jax, had come this far chasing rumors of a universal stabilizer, a device the ancient builders had used to knit reality together before their fall. The universe was fraying, wormholes collapsing, planets shifting orbits unpredictably. Humanity, dismissed as primitives in the galactic forums, had been laughed out of the discussions. "Let the upstarts tinker," the alien envoys had sneered. Now, with the Endeavour as their only lifeline, they were the last hope. Jax burst into the deck from the corridor, his witty grin absent for once. Sweat beaded on his forehead, tools clanging in his belt. "Bridge to you two eggheads, we've got incoming." 3 Raider ships, closing fast from the nebula's blind spot. "They're not hailing. Looks like they want the artifact bad." Tension coiled in Alara's chest like a spring. The Raiders were remnants of the fractured alliances, scavengers preying on the chaos. Losing the artifact now would mean not just failure but stranding them in this lawless fringe. How long? 10 minutes tops. Our shields are holding, but if they board... Jax trailed off, his eyes flicking to the hologram. He was the fixer, quick with a quip and quicker with a wrench, but even he knew the stakes. One wrong move and the Endeavour becomes another ghost in the void. Alara straightened, her mind racing through options. The initial plan, slip through the nebula undetected, had backfired when the artifact's emissions lit them up like a beacon. "Kai, can we use it? Overload their sensors or something?" Kai hesitated, his cautious nature warring with necessity. He leaned closer to the display, fingers dancing over controls. "Theoretically. It's emitting interference waves already. If I modulate the frequency to mimic their comms, it might scramble their targeting. But it's risky, the artifact could destabilize our own systems." "Do it," Alara said, her voice firm. No time for debate. She turned to Jax. "Get to engineering. Rig the auxiliary thrusters for a slingshot maneuver if this works." We punched through to the outer rim. Jax saluted mockingly, his wit resurfacing. "Aye, Captain Risky. Just don't blow us up before the party starts." He dashed off, leaving echoes in the corridor. As Kai worked, the ship shuddered, a warning shot glancing off the hull. Alarms blared, red lights bathing the deck in crimson. Alara watched the Raiders on the secondary screen, their jagged silhouettes weaving closer. One fired again, the impact rattling the deck plates. She braced, heart pounding. "Modulation complete," Kai announced, sweat trickling down his temple. He initiated the pulse. The artifact glowed brighter, its light spilling across the viewport like fractured dawn. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the Raiders' formation stuttered, their vectors veering wildly as if drunk on static. Alara seized the moment. Helm, evasive pattern delta. Full burn. The Endeavor lurched forward, engines roaring. The nebula's gases swirled around them, a turbulent veil hiding their escape. But the artifact's pulse had consequences. Consoles sparked and Kai cursed under his breath. It's feedback. Our NAV systems are glitching. We're off course heading into the dense core. Alara's grip tightened. They'd bought time, but the fraying universe had its own traps waiting. Jax's voice crackled over the intercom. Thrusters primed, but if we hit that gravity well, we're space dust. Through the viewport, the nebula parted to reveal a swirling maelstrom, a collapsed star's remnant, pulling at the ship like invisible hands. The raiders fell behind, their pursuit scrambled, but victory felt hollow. Alara met Kai's eyes, seeing the shared resolve. Humanity's grit had gotten them this far. Now it would have to pull them through the heart of disorder. As the Endeavor dove toward the anomaly, Alara plotted their next move, the artifacts hum a constant reminder of the cost. One clever adaptation at a time, they'd restore order or die trying. The stars ahead twisted, promising both peril and possibility. The dim glow of the auxiliary console flickered across Lena's face, casting shadows that danced like specters in the cramped bridge. She wiped sweat from her brow, her fingers leaving a streak of grease that she ignored. The ship's hum had turned ragged, a labored breath echoing the strain in her chest. Beside her, Jax hunched over the makeshift panel, his wiry frame taut as he jury-rigged another bypass. This entropy field's chewing through the stabilizers like acid, he muttered, voice low and edged with that familiar grit. No panic, just the steady resolve that had kept them alive through 9 jumps already. Kale, the alien emissary, floated nearby, his gelatinous form rippling in agitation, tendrils coiling around a data node. He wasn't built for this chaos. His species thrived in ordered nebulae, where gravitational harmonies sang eternal. Now the universe's decline pressed in, unraveling those harmonies thread by thread. The readings spike again, Kale's translator chimed, his words bubbling like submerged stones. If we don't seal the breach soon, the cascade will swallow the relay entirely. Lena nodded, her mind racing through schematics she'd memorized in quieter times. The relay, an ancient nexus of wormholes meant to knit the cosmos together, had been their goal since the mission began. Humanity's last gambit, not to conquer the decline but to outmaneuver it. Inject human ingenuity into the machine, rewrite the decay with clever algorithms born of Earth's scrappy history. But the field resisted, twisting their inputs into feedback loops that threatened to tear the hull apart. Jax, reroute power from life support, she said, her tone clipped, decisive. Brave wasn't a word she claimed, but action was her anchor. We buy time. He shot her a glance, eyes narrowing under the fringe of his unkempt hair. That's playing with fire, Cap. One more surge and we're breathing vacuum. Better than letting the whole arm of the galaxy unravel. She met his gaze, the unspoken weight of their crew's sacrifices hanging between them. The engineer lost to the first anomaly, the pilot to a misjump. Only 3 left now, bound by choices that felt heavier with each passing hour. Jax grunted, fingers flying over the controls. Sparks flew as the reroute engaged, the ship shuddering like a beast kicked in the ribs. Alarms blared, sharp and insistent, cutting through the tension. Kale's tendrils lashed out, stabilizing a console that buckled under the load. It's working, marginally. The field's density drops by 0.3%. But the victory soured fast. A new tremor rattled the deck, deeper this time, as if the void itself clawed at their seams. Lena braced against the bulkhead, watching the viewport where stars smeared into hazy streaks. The entropy wasn't just a hazard, it was alive, adaptive, feeding on their every fix like a predator learning its prey's moves. Plans backfiring, Jack said, slamming a fist on the panel. The witty edge in his voice had dulled to frustration. It's countering, amplifying the feedback. Kale's form pulsed with bioluminescent alarm. The universe declines order as we feared. Our interference accelerates it here. Lena's jaw tightened. No speeches, no surrender. She pulled up the core algorithm on her pad, the one pieced together from human archives. stories of defiance against impossible odds, coded into math. Then we adapt. Jax, isolate the harmonic injector. Kale, sync your neural link to it. We don't fight the chaos head-on, we weave it into the pattern. He hesitated, his tendrils quivering. Risky. My physiology, trust the grit, she replied, a faint smile cracking her resolve. It wasn't camaraderie for show, it was the glue that held them when stars fell silent. As Jax complied, the ship groaned under fresh assault. The viewport cracked, a spiderweb fracture blooming like frost on glass. Outside, the relay loomed, a colossal lattice of warped space, its edges fraying into nothingness. Lena keyed the sequence, her heart pounding in rhythm with the failing engines. The injector hummed to life, Kale's link weaving alien precision into human cunning. For a heartbeat, the field surged, threatening to consume them. Then, a shift, a subtle realignment like threads pulling taut on a loom gone mad. The smears in the stars sharpened, the ship's hum steadying to a defiant purr. But as the breach began to seal, a cost lingered. Jax slumped, clutching his side where a loose panel had grazed him, blood seeping through his jumpsuit. Kale dimmed, his energy sapped by the link. Lena exhaled, the weight of what came next settling in. The relay held for now, but the decline whispered onward, demanding more. They had bought the galaxy a breath, but the exhale would test them all. The dim glow of the emergency lights flickered across the bridge of the Odyssey, casting long shadows that danced like specters over the consoles. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrest of her chair, her knuckles white against the worn leather. Sweat beaded on her forehead, not from fear but from the raw exertion of the last hour, rerouting power, sealing breaches, and keeping her crew alive amid the chaos of the collapsing wormhole. Beside her, Engineer Tomas Ruiz hunched over a makeshift panel, his fingers a blur as he jury-rigged the inertial dampeners with scavenged conduits from the cargo bay. "Captain, the Singularity's pulling harder," Lieutenant Kira Voss reported from the navigation station, her voice steady but edged with strain. The young officer's eyes, sharp and unyielding, flicked between readouts. She'd been the cautious one from the start, always double-checking trajectories, but now caution had given way to desperate precision. "If we don't stabilize the core in the next 2 minutes, we're spaghettified." Elena nodded, her mind racing through the fragments of data streaming in. The universe's decline wasn't some poetic metaphor, it was literal. The ancient alien artifact they'd stumbled upon in the nebula had unraveled the fabric of space-time, a relic from a long-extinct civilization that humans, in their boundless curiosity, had poked too hard. What started as a routine survey mission had spiraled into this. A ship tearing itself apart, crew fighting not just for survival but to prevent the anomaly from swallowing an entire sector. Tomas cursed under his breath, a string of Spanish that Elena caught, something about stubborn circuits and his abuela's temper. He slammed a fist against the panel, and a spark jumped, illuminating the grease streaks on his face. "Got it? Dampeners at 60%. But the hull's buckling on decks 4 through 6. We lose those and the artifact's containment fails completely." The artifact, that glowing obelisk in the hold, humming with forbidden energy, had promised insights into faster-than-light travel beyond human dreams. Instead, it had invited disorder, twisting reality into knots. Elena's team, her small, unbreakable team, had adapted at every turn. Kira plotting escape vectors through the maelstrom, Tomas patching systems with sheer grit, and herself holding the line, making the calls no one else could. A shudder ran through the ship, metal groaning like a wounded beast. Alarms blared, red lights pulsing. From the comms, a faint voice crackled. Dr. Liam Chen from the science lab, the witty one who'd cracked jokes during the initial scans to ease tensions. Now his tone was clipped, urgent. "Captain, the artifact's resonating. It's amplifying the pull. If we vent the hold, we might disrupt the feedback loop, but it'll mean losing the obelisk, and half our fuel reserves." Elena waited in an instant. Venting meant stranding them light years from help, dooming any hope of returning home with discoveries intact. But holding on invited oblivion. "Do it," she said, her voice cutting through the din like a blade. "Tomas, seal the bulkheads around the hold. Kira, plot a course for the nearest stable point, use the emergency thrusters if you have to. Tomas moved without hesitation, his brave hands steady as he initiated the sequence. Air hissed from the vents, carrying the faint ethereal hum of the artifact into the void. The ship lurched, the pull easing fractionally but not enough. Kira's fingers flew over her controls, her cautious calculations now a gamble on human intuition. Adjusting, now. The Odyssey bucked, engines roaring in protest as they clawed away from the event horizon. Elena felt the G-forces press her into the seat, a tangible reminder of the cost, the lives they'd already lost, the colleagues sealed in failing sections, the dreams of exploration now scarred by hard choices. Through the viewport, the wormhole warped, a maw of fractured stars beginning to close, but not before a final tendril lashed out, shearing off a sensor array in a burst of plasma. As the alarms quieted to a dull whine, Tomas slumped back, wiping his brow. We're clear, Cap. But the drive's fried. We'll limp home if we make it at all. Kira exhaled, her shoulders dropping. Stable trajectory. But the sector, it's changed. Scans show residual rifts. We fixed our mess, but the universe remembers. Elena stood, placing a hand on each of their shoulders, camaraderie forged in fire. The triumph was earned, bittersweet, with the weight of what they'd unleashed lingering like echoes in the hull. Humanity's grit had pulled them through, but the stars now whispered of orders forever declined. The dim glow of the emergency lights flickered across the bridge, casting long shadows over the consoles where Jax hunched, his fingers dancing across the patched-together interface. Sweat beaded on his forehead, not from heat but from the raw edge of exhaustion that had settled in hours ago. The universe outside the viewport was a silent void, stars mocking their fragile bubble of survival with indifferent pinpricks of light. Behind him, Lena paced, her cautious steps measured against the hum of straining recyclers, while Miko leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, her witty retorts silenced for once by the weight of what came next. "We've got one shot," Jack said, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. The AI core they jury-rigged from salvaged alien tech pulsed faintly, its neural pathways bridging the gap between human code and the inscrutable logic of the declined order's relics. The resource shortage had whittled them down, water rations cut to sips, air thick with recycled CO2, but this was the pivot. The external challenge, that relentless cascade failure from the nebula's ion storm, had stripped their ship to bones. One wrong surge and the core would fry, leaving them adrift in the black, a footnote in some distant archive. Lena stopped pacing, her eyes narrowing at the readouts. The simulation said 62% viability. That's not a plan, that's a prayer. Her caution had kept them alive this long, spotting the microfractures before they became breaches, but now it warred with the necessity of risk. She glanced at Miko, who nodded once, sharp and sure. The engineer's grit had patched the hull with metaphors made metal, human ingenuity twisting xeno artifacts into something functional, something theirs. Miko pushed off the wall, sliding into the co-pilot's seat. Prayers are for species that don't improvise. Hit it, Captain. Her voice carried that undercurrent of camaraderie, the kind forged in zero-G repairs and shared silences over dwindling protein bars. Jax initiated the sequence, the core whining to life with a sound like tearing fabric. Alarms blared as energy feedback looped, the ship's frame shuddering under the strain. Sparks danced from a junction box, and for a heartbeat the lights dipped to black. Then, a surge. Not failure, but adaptation, the core learning, rewriting its own protocols in a hybrid dance of human algorithms and alien echoes. The recyclers kicked in with a whoosh, fresh air cycling through vents that had wheezed like dying lungs moments before. Jax exhaled, the tension uncoiling from his shoulders as readouts stabilized. Water purifiers hummed online, and the NAV computer plotted a course out of the nebula's grasp, stars aligning into a viable trajectory toward the nearest relay. But victory wasn't clean. Lena's hand rested on a console scarred by their efforts, her face etched with the cost. Miko's arm in a sling from a plasma burn, Jax's vision still spotting from neural feedback, and the ship itself, limping on auxiliary power, its once sleek lines pocked with hasty welds. The declined order's tech had saved them, but it whispered questions in the data streams. Why had humanity's ingenuity pierced its veil? What orders had the universe declined that they now enforced? They didn't speak of it as the ship accelerated, the void yielding to their will. Instead, Jax rose, clapping Miko on the good shoulder. Next port, first rounds on me. Laughter broke the quiet, earnest and ragged, binding them tighter than any contract. Outside, the stars watched, perhaps a little less indifferent.